Started. The biggest question I ever get asked is what order do I put the effects in? It's always something people want to know. Bottom line, there's no legal rules. Nobody's going to come and take you away if you put it in the wrong order. And you may find some order that works for you. But there are certain principles to get you started. And I'm going to go through the pedals sort of in the order that you might want to start. And I'll explain as I do each pedal why it's where it is. I think that may help. So, starting on the right, when I say something is before something, I mean it's between the guitar and the amp. So we start, the chain to me starts at the guitar, goes to the amp. I've heard people describe it the other way. I never understood why, but they do. So we're talking from the guitar to the amp. So from the guitar to the amp, the first pedal I have here, I'm not going to demo it right away, but just to let you know, it's a fuzz. It's a fuzz face type fuzz made by Earthquaker, a germanium fuzz. And germanium fuzzes, it's first because they don't like to see anything but a guitar coming into the input. If you have a true bypass pedal in front of it, that might work. But essentially they work very much off the volume of the guitar, and I'll demonstrate that to you. So that's why that's first. But let's start with, if you don't use that, what would normally be the next pedal would be the compressor. And this being Nashville, compressors have been a big part of Nashville sound for years. I mean, the Dynacomp, I remember reading a thing about Brent Mason and talking about his huge rack and all this stuff he's got. And oh, by the way, I also have a Dynacomp right at the beginning of the chain. Because it's when I started playing country, and I'm not even really a country player compared to the guys here, I realized immediately that's the sound. You know, it's like if you play something like, it sounds country enough, but if you play, there's guys that can get that kind of snap with their fingers. I'm not one of them. So that's one reason people use it. Also, for doing pedal steel stuff, I played in country bands for a long time when nobody could afford a pedal steel player, so I had to do pedal steel type things. And when you do, it really helps emulate the pedal steel. And when I explain how it works, you'll see why. Does anybody here not know what a compressor does, essentially? I mean, I know I'm in Nashville. People probably do. But what you might not realize is exactly how it works. What it is basically is an automatic amplifier. And when it hears the sound coming into it, you have set it to be at a certain volume. And if it's below that volume, it's going to bring it up to that volume. If it's above that volume, it's going to bring it down to that volume. And that's essentially what it's doing. And it also, people use it to add sustain. I used it for years, that's why I used it. I grew up playing in Manhattan, in New York. You were not allowed to play loud. There were people living upstairs from you. So you couldn't get your sustain by cranking up your amp. So I found that by plugging in a compressor, I could get, I can get it to sound, the guitar to sound like it was sustaining more than it was. So like, now it sounds like it's sustaining more than it is, but what's really interesting is it's virtual sustain. It's not real sustain. If you actually listen closely to where the note dies, it dies at exactly the same place, whether the compressor's on or not, because the compressor can't do anything if there's nothing coming out of the guitar. But what it does is it keeps the volume louder longer, so it sounds like the guitar is sustaining. So I found if I plugged one of these things into a deluxe, cranked a little bit, I was home free, and without having to turn the deluxe up really loud to get the kind of compression that you actually get from tubes. That's one thing people like tube amps. When you boost an amp and start overdriving it, it's doing the same thing that compressor is doing. It's raising the volume level and sort of squashing the top and making it sustain longer. That's one of the things it's doing. So if you have a compressor, for years the Dynacomp is basically, it had volume and sustain. And that was your choice. It was on or off, and you could add, turn the sustain up or not. And what it does, because it squashes that initial attack, or it can, that's one of the things it does, because your initial attack is to be, am I doing something happening with this thing? No. No, that's right. Still on? Okay. Because it's squashing that initial attack, it creates a similar effect to what a pedal steel player does with his volume pedal. Pedal steel players almost never, except when they're playing fast, and when they're doing all those chords on a ballad or something, they're swelling into those notes. And this gives you, because the initial attack is being squashed and it's coming up, it gives you that sound like it. And if I play those same things without it, aside from not being as loud, it just doesn't have the same effect at all. I'm going to try and get this more unity gain. And for those that don't know, unity gain means the same volume when it's on as when it's off. Right, so that's pretty much the same thing. So the Dynacomp, as I was saying, only came with sustain or volume. Modern compressors will often, actually starting with the Boss compressor, they came with an attack knob. And what the attack knob does is you can adjust how squashed that initial attack is. So if I have the attack knob all the way counterclockwise on this, and now turn it on, oh, it is on, okay. I've never used this one before. I don't know if that's minimal or maximal. Let me see. Yeah, it's subtle, but let me make sure there's plenty of Can you hear the difference? With the, I have to do it wildly one way or the other for you to really hear the difference. But when I turn it completely clockwise, it lets the attack come through a little more. Now the great thing about this Wampler pedal, and something people are starting to do on compressors, is it's got a blend on there that allows an unaffected signal to come through. So you can get the sustain, but you can get more of that initial attack of the guitar. So like this is, I think, I have the compressor on, but there's, it's as if I had it off, practically. Almost no difference, but am I doing that with this thing? I think I have to relocate this. Give me a second. Is anybody on the board?
No. Hold on.
Might want to turn me down while I do this. It says I'm bending over. I think it's upsetting it. Am I down? Oop. Testing, testing. Still on. Okay. I'm still coming through.
You're good.
Okay. Hey, Mike. Let me see if I put it in the back like they do on the David Letterman show. That will work. All right. All right. You can turn me back up. So, where was I? Okay. So here's the blend. So now I will blend in. You can turn me down a little bit, I think. So there's, you hear the squash coming through a little bit, but you're still getting that initial attack, which is really cool. The other thing I found I could use a compressor for, and this is something we'll discuss throughout this, which is stacking. A lot of people, use individual pedals for individual sounds, but what a lot of the pros do, and what I've discovered late in life, is that if you stack one pedal into another, you can get effects that you wouldn't get from any one pedal. And what you can do is, like if I'm turning on an overdrive now, I'm going to turn the gain down in the overdrive, so it's just, and now turn, oh, the compressor was on, okay. There it is without the compressor. Probably couldn't do that. So can't do that without the compressor. The compressor is going to keep that going, and I don't have to be loud to do it. If anybody here is an Adrian Belew fan, he keeps I don't know what compressor he's using now, but for years he had a Dynacup on all the time, full on all the time, and that's how he got all those cool, sort of squashed, you know, rhythm sounds. Let me get a little more. And he could throw on a fuzz. Just sustain for days, and you can do that kind of stuff. So that pretty well covers the compressor, I think. But what I'm going to also do is take questions on each pedal as we go along, because if you're anything like me, you won't remember it by the end. Anyway, so does anybody have questions on compression?
I do. Mine's noise all the time. Is that just inherent in that type of pedal?